No, thank you very much, Neeraj bhai, for that introduction. I think you see, I'm just a student of law, and I continue to be student of law. I must say that it's such a vast field that you can never be expert in even one area out of that. But thank you very much. I'm very grateful to Sunil Bhai for giving me this opportunity. And entire GIS family, we've been wanting to talk and we've been wanting to share our thoughts on innovation, on inventions, on intellectual property rights. Uh, Thank you very much for everybody for attending this uh, in Saturday evening. I know it's a weekend, and just now, as you mentioned, Neeraj bhai, I think the political drama going on there in Gujarat is also very engaging. So, in preference over that, when we look at innovation, I've it kind of there's more responsibility on me now to make this an interesting and worth its while kind of a thought sharing process. But I would feel and request everybody to please feel free to ask for questions, make it more interactive because each one of you are experienced person, each one of you are have worked in this space and worked in this space for number of years. Therefore, please feel free to make this more interactive. I have, I see there's one hand raised, but I'm going to request whoever is the coordinator currently that would you, because I think Geeta Bain has raised that hand. So would you want her to speak or how do you want to do that?
I
No,
think
sir,
it is
just
by
a
default. It's by default.
normally,
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I would say rather than that, we have let's have a first brief from Suhasji, and then last in 5 minutes we can discuss something we want as we want. But yeah,
Sure. Thank you very much. So please allow me to share my screen. Is this visible?
yes, it is visible now.
Okay, I'm just quickly going to kind of take you through in some of my thoughts, and these are not something which you will kind of read in any books or you will get in any education classes. You won't find most of these on the internet. Google University, WhatsApp University will not give you this. So these are some of my thoughts, and I'm going to share this with you. See, but as a lawyer, I must put this in place to say that there are a few caveats here. Whatever I'm going to kind of suggest during this brief talk is not a legal opinion or an advice. I've been using some of the trademarks and some of the case studies within this presentation, but they are covered by the fair use. So don't get an idea whether I'm violating anybody's intellectual property rights here. There are a couple of aspects where we will take a deep dive and look at and what I call a eagle's view approach, but that doesn't mean that we're looking at everything in a very exhaustive manner. And of course, my views are my personal and they don't kind of necessarily represent Legacy's views. With these caveats, I just want to say thank you very much, a big salute to all the Corona warriors and the frontliners. I know I've been reaching out to Sunil Bhai and others many a times to say that we need a help somewhere or the other. But each of these Corona warriors who are healthcare experts, doctors, a big thank you to them. Big thank you to the law enforcement officers who have kind of kept us safe. And the law and order situation has been remarkable and exemplary because they've gone beyond the call of duty to make sure that poor people on the street don't starve and things like that. I mean, there are very various and many cases of this nature. Many stories that have come up, but thanks a lot to every law enforcement officer, and we call them Leos of India today. They're in true sense the lions and tigers of India. Thanks to all the frontliners. Thanks lastly to those people who are artists. You know, the art during pandemic has taken a different shape, and whether it is the poetry, whether it is picture, whether it is art on the sand, I think people have actually reached out to express themselves through various art forms, and that these art forms have kept all of us very positive during this pandemic period. So thank you, an expression of gratitude and a big salute to all the Corona warriors. Coming back to the agenda today, I think let's look at this 2017 mantra that our Prime Minister, Honorable Mr. Modi, gave us by saying innovation is life. And therefore, don't stagnate, because if you stop innovation, you will stagnate. And that stagnation is something which is virtually like a death today. Therefore, innovation is life is the mantra, at least from 2017. It has been there for a while, but at least in 2017, India started talking about it as the phrase innovation is life. Okay. Then we will say, when we talk about innovation in life, very briefly, I'm going to touch upon as to why not to innovate, or why people give reasons for not innovating. And there are about 6, 7 very solid reasons why people say, why should I innovate? And it has its own merits, and we need to look at it, because if we are inculcating innovation as a way of life, or innovation itself as a life, we must understand why somebody is saying that it makes no sense in innovating. We'll look at some of the innovation types and what are the myths around it, and we'll look at innovation, the IPR way, the innovation way, the future way, and the Indian way of innovation, and why the world today is wanting to look at and take care of India in a very, very different manner. And that's briefly what we'll touch upon. So why not to innovate? And I'm going to use some of the R.K. Lakshman cartoons and caricatures here. He was a great artist. Each and every piece from R.K. Lakshman is an art form unto itself, although he hardly had 4 centimeter by 2 centimeter space on a right hand side on Times of India. But I think I must say almost about 40% of the readers always looked at reading that 4 by 2 column first. But let's look at why not to innovate, or why people say that they don't want to innovate. I know of a company, a large Indian brand, a very popular company that manufacture paints. In fact, once I kind of started interacting with their senior executives, and those people told me, saying, please tell us why we should innovate. We are successful. We are earning handsome profits. We don't need to improvise also, forget about innovation. And since we are successful, we are earning decent amount of profit. I don't understand why we should innovate. And I try to tell them, no, let's look at it this way. There would be a competition coming tomorrow. They might want to replicate whatever you're doing. They're saying it's not too convincing for us. They're saying, then I try to tell them, saying, you are a leader in India. Why don't you look at taking leadership at the global level? They came back and said, sorry, that's not our vision. And therefore, if we embark, and as and when we embark that vision as becoming a global leader, we will try and see whether we need to innovate. But today, we are happy where we are. We are very successful. We are earning modest to aggressive profits. And year over year, we are growing. So why should we innovate? So that's one kind of a question that people keep asking, saying we are successful, therefore, why should we innovate? Very clear answer to that was, innovation is the way of life. If you do not innovate today, you may still continue to be profitable business, but are you meaningful? Are you kind of purposeful in your business? Because what you may have earned as larger profits, greater profits, you can plow it back to the society. You can kind of make a larger contribution all across. And it's not merely success in terms of profitability that will determine whether you're responsible or not. You will be responsible if you are a responsible corporate citizen. And there are various such logics and reasons that can be given to counter this paradigm or this paradox that why should we innovate if you're successful? Second, they say everyone is so busy that we have no time to today look at innovations. We have no time to kind of create an organization or an organogram, or kind of create something within our organization where people can be deployed to look at innovation as a practice area. We are too busy. That's another kind of reason why people say we don't want to innovate. I don't think that's good enough a reason. In my view, in a day-to-day life, in a day-to-day activities and actions, I think the innovation itself happens, and you need to therefore focus on getting that innovation captured, however busy you might be. I can give you just one example here about IT industry. If we made a mark, India made a mark at a global level because of IT services, including IT outsourcing services. Overall, business process outsourcing came back here. World's largest IT companies are from India, and they've made a mark. They've actually kind of made such a remarkable uh, mark for Indians that the entire perception about India has changed over the period of time because of IT industry. Now, however, when a competition became very severe post 2008, when I think every dollar counted, when actually the cost arbitrage became one of the critical elements together with time arbitrage, and when jurisdictions such as Indonesia and Philippines especially came forward to kind of compete with India, I think what is it that and which are the processes today on the business process outsourcing that are still outsourced into India? If one does an analysis about it, and we did it some time back, you will realize the BPOs that innovated their processes to bring down the dollar costs, the BPOs that innovated from the technology perspective to say that we don't need anything on premise today, we can actually put it on the cloud. So there are various such innovated processes that became very, very important contributing factor to, and a very overwhelming reason as to why these processes outsourcing continued. Now, whether there were patents coming out of it, whether these innovations resulted into any of the IPRs being formally captured is another question. But the fact that these innovations have led for the customers of these companies to stick with them because they knew that this company will be on the top of what's happening at the global level and move in such a manner that they will reduce costs for you, they will become more efficient, they will become more effective. And that's where I think the innovation played a critical role. So the fact that you're busy is not really an excuse. Innovation is risky, yes, it is. And at times, I think this becomes a very paradoxical situation. When today at the corporate level, the risk and understanding of the risk becomes a core function at the board level, risk management at the enterprise level today, mandated by SEBI through LODR and various norms, become very critical. It is at that point in time that the innovation has to be balanced out on the risk factors. And yes, at times it may sound as a very valid reason as to why you will not innovate, because when you're fighting for survival, you don't want to undertake any additional obligations which are riskier in place. So there is a point there. Customers don't ask for it or ask for better performance, efficiency, better products, better services. So why should we innovate? I think that can simply be answered by saying it's no longer enough to be the best in your class. You got to be next in your class. And I think that becoming next is many a times you go back to the customer. Steve Jobs would tell his customer saying, I will tell you what you want. I will tell you what are the features which will appeal to you, or what are the features which will become this instrument as a more intuitive instrument for you to be very helpful for you. No customer ever went back to him and told him saying, I need a design in a particular fashion and manner. He assumed the instructions from the customers, if I were to put the lawyer's language, and he said, I must give you the best because that's my obligation. Therefore, many times customers are not going to ask you. They will move away from you without asking you to improvise, innovate, invent. They will just move out. So in the existing, whatever product, services, manufacturing that I do, there is a scope for improvement, and still there is a lot of improvement to be done. Therefore, why should I kind of innovate today? I should continue to improvise. See, improvisation will probably give you marginal benefits, and that's the difference between improvement or improvisation and innovation there. But still there is scope for improvisation, does not really take away the case for innovation. 8 out of 10 times, the reason that is given for not innovating is that the companies, the entities, the individuals, the groups, the teams actually fear the failure. And that's, again, innovation is a risky. Taken to the next level, the companies fear failure. They're saying, if we fail, what happens? Last year, I put in X amount of money, X rupees in R&D, and nothing came out of it. Therefore, this year, if I continue to do that, we will fail. I think the fear of failure is something where I think people come out with a logic, come out with a reason as to why one should not innovate. If that is the case, then I think that any growth, any movement forward, any way forward in any business will get stagnated. Just look at briefly the types of innovations that we have. You see, improvisations, innovations, inventions, three different things. We focus on innovations. Problem solving innovations is the first, and this is where I think we'll come back to the myth about necessity being mother of all inventions or innovations. That's a myth, and I'll tell you why we call that as a myth. But I'm saying there are problem solving innovations that lead to a sustainable solution. That is one type of innovation that we need to look at and focus. Now, there are pioneering innovations which are first of its kind, and they become so pioneering that they're picked up as the third type of innovation, which is the industry best practices moving around, and best practice innovations come out. And then there is a technology innovation as the fourth type of the innovation that kind of takes place. I'll just give you an example. We have a client, a lady called Mrs. Namita Sohni. Namita Sohni, she gave a birth to a child which was cleft child. In a sense, her daughter's upper lip was stapled when she was born. It was like a cleft child. Therefore, a cleft child has a problem in the feed. So whenever she would take her daughter to feed, there will be a lot of milk that would get wasted. When it started off with the breastfeeding part. Now, slowly, when she tried to analyze everything, there were no sophisticated pumps available at that point in time. But she realized that there is a way in which, if you actually turn the nipple in a particular angle, the milk doesn't spill. And she created a nipple and a cleft bottle out of it, and out of her own necessity, out of her desire to solve her own problem. She created a bottle which a cleft child can hold at a particular angle. The cleft nipple does not spill the milk or the liquid from the bottle. Now, she used it. This is called Boond, by the way. You can check it out, Boond, Boond. And the Boond is kind of national award-winning innovation currently. So she created this. Now, was this a pioneering innovation? Of course, it solved her problem because her child started growing. And over the period of time, post-surgery also, there is some innovation that is required in the nipple and the bottle, so that cleft surgery does take place. And after the cleft surgery, you see, one has to improvise or innovate that bottle a bit and then move on, so that the child, when it grows, the cleftness doesn't remain there because the surgery has taken place. But during this phase of 4 years, 5 years, at times 8 years or 10 years, you got to feed the child through this bottle, through this nipple now, which is kind of modified. Now, was this pioneering innovation? Answer is no, it was not pioneering innovation, because there were some manufacturers who manufactured the bottles and the nipples for cleft children, but there were very few in the world. They were very expensive as well. So what did Namita do? Namita said, my child is now grown, my problem has been solved, but I'm not going to keep quiet. I'm going to look at how do we manufacture these bottles in such a manner that this becomes affordable to almost everybody. So she's now moved on to the next level, where she's now designed the bottle. She's created a design. She's filed for 2 patents also in the process. So world over, it is novel and it is invention there. And she has moved to convert this into technology innovation. So what started off as her need to solve the problem, has converted her today to a technology innovator being recognized all across. And I think that's what the innovations actually do to you in terms of a more sustainable manner. You see, some of the myths again around innovation is, only large corporates can innovate. I think we all know, and I think all the members of GIS know this, and those people who are very close to innovation and inventions and ideas and concepts are not monopoly of even a matured mind. Even a small child, a small school-going children, or even an uneducated child. And I think this has been proven through various yatras, various grassroots innovations that have been captured in India today, in Africa today, even in remote and Adivasi areas, that the innovation is not the monopoly of large corporates or even adult mind or rich. It is just a fertile mind that looks beyond the vision that kind of innovates. And therefore, that is one area, one myth that needs to be broken down. So even a small company can focus on innovation and can actually compete at a global level. You see, our need will be the creator. This is what necessity is mother of invention. This is the proverb that came out. But this was first time mentioned in so many words that our need will be the creator by Plato in 375 BC, converted by Britishers into a maxim, which was like saying, necessity is mother of all invention. Now, frankly, I don't agree with this proposition. This is good to quote. It's good for children to say that please write an essay about how necessity is mother of all inventions. But today, when you want to innovate, when you want to invent, it is not merely the necessity what will drive you to invent. Your ability to invent or your thought process to invent has become a part of your DNA. And that's where I go back to 2017, Prime Minister Honorable Mr. Narendra Modi's quote to say that innovation is life. It is no longer required only for survival. If you have to grow, it becomes part of your DNA. If it becomes part of your DNA, then innovation is life. It's no longer about whether necessity will drive you to innovate. No. Survival will also drive you to innovate. Life itself becomes such that life becomes innovation per se. And that's where life is innovation as a paradigm that comes in here. Another myth is that everybody says you invent alone, but to innovate, you need a community. Maybe to innovate in a very sustainable manner, to test your innovation, you probably need a community to come forward to. But that's not true all the time. You see, your innovations could also be alone, like your inventions could be alone. At the same time, what's happening today is, and this is where I think the world needs to take a look at what India is doing. And I think Indian large corporate, small corporate, startup ecosystems, academics, everybody is coming together to create community innovations, to create grassroots frugal innovations. And they are challenging at a global level. We'll also look at the connectivity between innovation and intellectual property. And that's an interesting interface there. You see, when we talk about IPs, so today what has happened is, as all of us know, IPRs like right from patent to the jugaad to know-how to show how, whatever you talk about is intangibles in itself. Those intangibles get converted into intellectual property rights. And those rights at times are very concrete, at times are frugal, and they are intangible. But sorry to say this, while we all understand, and I don't have to preach or I don't have to talk much about it, is IPR are jurisdictional in nature, not to this audience, definitely. IPRs are jurisdictional in nature. So country by country, you will get the protection, but the fundamentals are boundaryless. When you talk about novelty in patentability analysis, it ought to be novel all across the world. Nobody could have invented it. That itself will disqualify it to be invention. Talk about obviousness, you talk about efficacy. All of these are fundamental factors which are uh, boundaryless, but at the same time will protect you from the rights perspective from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. When I say the concrete nature of IPRs, the two examples that we need to talk about is actually the patents and the TRIPS waiver that is being talked about in the light of COVID vaccination. I think if the TRIPS waiver happens, you see, where is the quid pro quo? Where is the trade-off? In a sense, if AstraZeneca, Moderna, or even Bharat Biotech have invented tremendous amount of money, they have spent time and they have spent efforts in creating vaccine molecules. And now today the world is saying that you've got to waive it in the larger interest, and the TRIPS waiver initiated by India, followed by South Africa. Today, I think almost about, if I'm not mistaken, even the US had joined this to say that fine, it makes sense for us to give waiver because in the larger community interest, forget about the individual pecuniary interest, that those can be matched, those can be looked at being provided for. But you can't wait for 10 years or 14 years or 20 years monopoly, 10 years because utility patents would have 10 years. You can't wait for 20 years monopoly to be given to somebody and therefore protect the patent rights. You need to kind of do a quid pro quo today in a different form and manner. It's not disclosure of your invention against monopoly. It's disclosure of your invention for more cooperation at the community level so that the world gets vaccinated. So therefore, patents, which are tangible intellectual property rights today, are going through these challenges, including at the jurisdictional level, you will have compulsory licensing happening. You will have challenge to the efficacy happening in the context of a particular society or jurisdiction. That's Novartis Supreme Court judgment for us. So actually, there are various challenges here in concretized manner of looking at patents. I'll take the trademark as an example. You talk about securitization of collaterals. You will have Dunkin' Donut talking about $150 million securitization of all franchisee revenues coming in there. But it kind of actually contradicts with the insolvency proceedings there. Kingfisher, we all know 3,000.
Sorry,
we're running out of time.
Yeah, might be we will disconnected within 2 minutes. So you continue. We will rejoin within 2 minutes. Yeah, on same ID and same password. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I will try to expedite it. I'm sorry about it.
Yeah, that might be cut down. That's why I interrupted you. Yeah, it's please.
Okay, sure.
You carry on. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, thank you. It's only 1.5 minutes left. Okay, fine. So trademarks, I think Kingfisher 3,700 crore brand as kind of being valued today. We all know what happened to that brand over the period of time. We all know what's its value today. So between this completely intangible and concrete, there is a lot of bullshit that goes on. Pardon my use of word, but I couldn't find better word to describe what's happening in this space better than the bullshit word there. You see, Jugaad and Chalta Hai seems to have been taken to the forefront to say that that's innovation. And therefore, we should look at Jugaad as an innovation in the Indian context. You see, negative lean on the Kingfisher brand, which was also collateralized today, because Indian banking system didn't allow collateralization. Therefore, in most of the cases, negative lien was created that has no meaning if it's not followed up through in terms of a proper documentation. And it really, negative lien has no meaning there. So I think it's this bullshit that I'm really, really worried about. And that's what we need to look at cutting it, and maybe just we'll kind of log back. Sure. Thank you very much. And I won't take too much of time. Just about a couple of more slides that I would want to take. So, sir, what's happening? In this space currently, between the innovation and the money, because I think it's very important that when we talk about intangibles, sorry, those intangibles need to be converted to somewhere or other monetization of your intellectual property, because that's very important. As we saw in some of those cartoons of R.K. Lakshman, you may have a brilliant idea, But if it doesn't have industrial application and it doesn't make money, what's the point? So the world is looking at ownership engineering, and that's taking place as we speak, very predominantly in large companies, small companies, and almost everywhere. So one of the things is to say that I will forego the ownership. I mean, look at Elon Musk. What Elon Musk does in Tesla is not a single patent being filed. Does it mean that he doesn't innovate? No, it means that he's the most innovative company of the world today. The entire value of Tesla share today is dependent on what's happening, whether he is moving in right direction in terms of his electric vehicles being scalable or in terms of wireless electricity being generated. I'm taking the other extreme. Or in terms of even his jaywalk over Mars or the moon. So the technology that Tesla is talking about, it's not that it's not patentable, but Elon Musk says that, sorry, I'm not going to patent. I'm not going to patent because my competition and my long-term competition is China. If we publish the patents today, the Chinese would just use them like a recipe book and compete with us in a very short possible time, probably overtake us. So what he is doing is, he's saying, I'm going to forego the ownership over the patent. I'm not going to go through the monopolistic nature of my technologies. I don't want those monopolies because basically I want to continue to stay ahead of the time, and therefore I'm not going to patent. You see, you look at what Bill Gates did in 1998. You see, he says there were a lot of copies that were happening on the entire Microsoft platform. Office 365 was copied in different form and manner in China. Bill Gates said, I am fine so long as they are stealing from me. They are stealing based on Microsoft platform. I am fine. I want them to steal from ours because tomorrow they will get addicted. And that's how I think he today has 125 billion revenues from China, whereas companies like Amazon don't have any say there, don't have any stay there, don't have any foothold there. So that's a different strategy today. You see, now you look at IBM. IBM was focused at one point in time the largest patent filer of the world on the technology and software side. And today, the IBM's revenues from open source are much larger than the IBM's revenue from licensing of technology, where they have patented softwares and patented technologies. You see, the third element is you look at and encourage the theft happening. And then you manifest it in various form and manner differently. Now, if you go to Times Square or even at times in Goa grey market, you will get a Rolex look alike. Do you mean to say Rolex company doesn't know that this is happening? That and on the Times Square, their Rolex watches are being sold at and those are all duplicate. They're all spurious in that sense. But they allow that to happen because they know, and it's a kind of a statistically proven theory that almost 40-45% of those who steal at the first place in terms of technology or buy a lookalike product, whether it's Montblanc pen or whether it is Rolex watch, eventually end up buying a genuine product. Because one, Rolex's segment is not of those who are going to buy the watch on the Times Square. Their segment is something different. But this segment that buys the Rolex lookalike today is tomorrow, when it can afford, is going to buy Rolex genuine watch. So actually, encouraging or tolerating theft, it's some area where IPs and innovators are looking at saying, fine, open source is one such example where somebody will use the source, somebody will use my source code, somebody will use my IP and improvise, innovate, which innovation comes back to me and becomes far more useful to me as well. So that's the area in which we talk about network externalities and licensing versus open source kind of a debate that goes on. You see, leaning onto ambiguity is another area. You take Ola, Uber as an example. I mean, they don't own anything. Even the technology platform and the source code is owned by someone else. But what they are saying is that if the law is ambiguous today, if the regulatory overlay, whether you talk about AI, for example, AI regulations are now coming up in EU. EU is the first one to notify them. Now the US is talking about it. But I think the AI, the artificial intelligence regulations that are coming up, till now it was very ambiguous. Now that ambiguity is giving way to a far better regulated space that's coming up. Therefore, leaning into ambiguity, taking the first mover advantage to yourself as to your advantage, and then moving around and innovating is a large part of innovation that happens everywhere, including predominantly at the startups today. Of course, we've seen data, we've seen data privacy as the data as the fundamental right recognized in India, and that ownership will pave way for a lot of technologies that will come up. In all of this backdrop, when we look at Indian way, when we look at what's happening in India, I think you will have to look at the way of innovation in India is I way. It moves from intellectual property to intellectual profit to intellectual partnership. And this is the thought I want to leave with you. India is not in the race of filing number of patents. And I think a great move from GIS in terms of oath being administered across is an indication of the fact that we want to capture innovations in terms of intellectual property. But we are not in that race to say, like the Xerox became the single largest patent filer in the world in a very short period of time, or China becomes single largest country that files largest number of patents. Now, one has to understand how China, caught up with this race and became part of the race and has taken the leadership position. You see, China recognizes utility patents, and utility patents have a value of 10 years. And we all know that utility patents, the rigmarole are the standards of examination and the standards of novelty and patentability applied to utility patents are not of the same rigor as that of patents, let's say in India are concerned. India does not recognize utility patents. The moment, if we were to look at it and we were to look at our legislation being changed today to promote utility patents, you will realize the amount of innovation that gets captured will be tremendous. Probably, again, in a short span of time, India could become not the largest, but one of the largest amongst 3 or 4 players in the world, if Indian legislations today allow the utility patents to come up. And I think that's a learning for India. But at this point in time, we are not in the race of number of IPs getting filed. There is an intellectual pride that gets associated with intellectual property and innovation and then intellectual pride. I think we are also not there. We don't take pride in terms of saying that the core innovations and the core inventions are to us. We are fine to say, forget the pride part of it. We are going to look at what is the time to value and what is the profitability. And I think I'm conscious of the fact that I'm addressing this to Gujarat Innovation Society, where I think more than pride, what is the value that the intellectual property is bringing is going to be more important. And I think in most of the European countries, most of the Western countries, the intellectual pride and the number race has taken a forefront. And therefore, with the pride comes that paranoia. The paranoia, like what Elon Musk's quote said, the paranoia is that if I file for patents today, if I file for intellectual property rights today, is there somebody who is going to copy it? Where is the enforcement regime and how we are going to enforce the innovations and IPRs? And therefore, that intellectual paranoia comes. So if you look at these first three factors, the Indian way of looking at things today, and most of the corporates have now started looking at this in this manner. They're saying we are not in the race. We have no pride. that we don't want to say that we filed X number of patents or that we are innovators. No, we just want to make money. And that paranoia that somebody will copy, and that's the biggest problem in the innovation. If you have a core strength and your fundamentals are right on innovation, I think you are not paranoid about if somebody is going to copy. If somebody is going to copy, the copy is going to come back to you. You will improvise. You will innovate. You will make it better. But the person who has copied and through him, his ecosystem becomes your ecosystem. Secondly, people are also looking at time to value today. Forget about IPR's registrations. 6 to 8 months, 9 months, you probably get an IPR registration with the digital workflows that have come up today. But they are saying, what is the value? And what is the time and value equation? I must understand the money. I must understand rupees and naya paisa at the end of this process. And most importantly, I think India has started learning today now that forget the intellectual profit, forget the intellectual pride, intellectual properties. Intellectual profits are important, and for that we must get into intellectual partnering. Whether it is through startup, whether it is to academic labs, whether it is to individual innovators. I think this partnership is something which itself is leading way to a very large innovations happening today, because COVID has accelerated. When we talk about AI, the amount of AI work that's happening at the startups in India or at the individual level also is phenomenal. The Atal incubation centers all across, attached to some of the academic institutes, are leading the way in terms of looking at what is the technological development that's happening today. When you talk about IoT, when you talk about AI, when you talk about 5G, all of these are going to come to the center space of anything and everything that you do, whether it's manufacturing 4.0 or generation next. On any element of life today, I think the fact that we have realized, and I think thanks to IT industry, thanks to the technological advancement, India has realized the value of partnering. And that value is taking us to the forefront of all these developments, the digital developments that are happening across the world, which will actually touch upon every element of life. And that's where I think innovation is life is going to touch upon. So if you look at these technologies as the platform, technologies as the way of getting touched upon through the life, you will realize, we will all realize that the Indian way, the I way, is going to be very, very important way of looking at life, way of looking at innovation as life. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Suhasji, for great insight from the legal point of view and the new direction to view innovation in the new way. Yeah. Thank you very much. There are two questions. I would say first from the Geetaji. Geetaji, can you unmute yourself and ask the question?
No, sir. I don't have any questions. Sorry.
Okay. And so the second question is from Anandji. Anandji is there? Anandji might be left, but his question is like that: whether the proprietary information, technical know-how, non-patented, can be protected by the law in India. Whether confidential information can be protected by the law in the India.
Yes, it can be protected, and I think there are various judgments that are holding the fort. As also there is a Contract Act which kind of actually makes sure. Now, with kind of Specific Relief Act having been amended from 2019, it is also kind of pushing these matters onto injunctive relief far more particularly. So I think with 2019 amendment of Specific Relief Act, I think the courts have now seized with the matters where the injunctions will be granted on breach or anticipatory breach of confidentiality. That's a large differential proposition.
Right. Anyone else who would like to?
Mobile
આપી દો આ ગ્રુપમાં હમણાં મૂકી દો એમનો મોબાઈલ નંબર ચાલે બીજો કોઈ ક્વેશ્ચન્સ છે So can we continue? Should we?
Yes, sir. Please go.
Yeah. Suhas, one more question from my side. What is
Sure.
the time? Sometimes technology is so running fast, and we had even though we digitalize ourselves and in the IPR patterns, it took so long time. So is it any improvement is going on in such process? Because by the 6 months, new chips comes, new technology comes. Because I am involving in so many technologies and robotics field and AI, so I know. By the time we think of pattern and the pattern comes now, the technology is already outdated. Might be the things like happen like that. So is there any way?
You see, this is genre of technology that's emerging across the world, which is called Emerging Technologies Computerized Invention, ETCI. The ETCI treatment on the patentability is undergoing a change all across in all major jurisdictions, including in India today. You see, in India, I think we're happy to know that probably is the only country where a digital patent certificate gets generated. There's no country in the world today where the digital certificate gets generated. So we've gone up to that level in terms of digitizing our workflows. So I think that has reduced the time taken to patent from application, drastically. However, you see, our examination and the capacity around at the examination level is still very much wanting if we consider a global benchmark. So today, I think we have got patents for our clients within about 1.5 years' time. Now, yes, the technology might become obsolete next month, and I completely take your point. And therefore, when you talk about utility patents, which would be through accelerated examination, far more accelerated examination, and a far quicker grant, and you have a shorter term of the patent. So I think, yes, India should very clearly look at granting patents to and diluting its efficacy standards a bit. Look at whether there is something comparable to utility patents that come in, and therefore reduce this gap between ETCI application to patent. You see, globally, ETCI, that there is still a gap, even at a global level, in most of the evolved jurisdictions. Because emerging technologies, computerized inventions, when they get filed, they get classified as ETCI. So they go on the fast track route because the technologies are changing. Despite of that, between the change in the technology and your application to grant, there is a gap. And that's how human mind is. And I must say, it's a kind of, it's like, the Chinese saying, mind is monkey, and it kind of sits on 40 trees every minute. You see? So actually, you look at it this way, this gap is going to continue. But how do you reduce that gap? I think there's an overwhelming case today for India to look at utility patents, to look at something akin to utility patents. We came out with a software patenting guidelines, but I think is the emerging technologies, computerized invention, ETCI patenting via faster route. That's a requirement today.
Yeah.
But thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, because I am facing some issues on because I'm mentoring and I'm owning so many patents, so that's why. But that's a part of technology, and might be technology take times, but it would come sooner or later. Yeah. Thank you, Tapan bhai. Can we have an oath on screen? Tapan bhai, yeah. So let's have an oath. So this is the oath we are as a being GIS Foundation. We started to make oath of innovation, and that is we are spreading out. So let's have a oath all together. Yeah. In the fill in the blanks, we have to put our names. Yeah, that is
correct.
Yeah. So I, Neeraj Shah, in the presence of
I,
God,
Suhas Tuljapurkar, in the presence of God, take oath that I realize the value of knowledge and innovation. I shall strive to at least have one innovation in next 1 year and make innovation and knowledge seeking a way of life for me and my surroundings. Thank you very much. I'm just
thank
taking
you,
this
Suraj.
oath for at least fourth or fifth time, but I always would love to do this.
Yeah, that's a great part. Yeah, thank you very much. So we are on the concluding part. Thank you very much for innovative and inspiring talk. Really, Suhaji, you have taken a new way to look at the innovation. Yeah, thank you very much for that insight and everything.